Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 151 review. This was a standard 2-week sprint, which went over the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. So you'll see that there's a smaller number of activity than usual. I will give the overview. Harpreet will update us on UI, Adam on providers, Joe V on the platform, and Alberto on the API. So as you see here, we dropped considerably in terms of the number of pull requests created, opened, and merged in the sprint, down from a high of 340 a couple of sprints ago. Those 340s and 314s, those did have a lot of developer activity, moving ManageIQ style and some other things that really had very little to do with the code base, but had to do with the developer experience. In terms of the breakout, 24 were bug fixes and 20 were enhancements out of all the pull requests merged. And we don't really, we had trouble creating health charts because of the ManageIQ style fixes, so we will reevaluate and try to get them back in when the health charts are available again. And with that, I turn it over to Harpreet.
Thank you, Oleg. Hello, everyone. Not that many PRs were merged in UI repos this sprint. Only 10 PRs were merged, and there were 2 enhancements, 4 bug fixes, 1 React form conversion, and few others. Main PRs are highlighted over here on the slide with the links, and I only have 1 screenshot to go over. So next slide, please. Some additional fields were added to OVF template catalog item, add edit screens to allow users to specify data store, network, and disk format options. New fields are highlighted on the screenshot here. And that's all for the UI for this time. With that, over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. So big changes for core on providers for this sprint, where we moved a bunch of provider-specific settings out of the core settings YAML and distributed them out to the different providers. So Jason went through the main settings YAML, found all the ones that looked like they belonged to the plugins, and moved them all out there. So that was nice. For Amazon, so Amazon was actually the first non-container provider that supported tag mapping. And so when it was just added with VM and image as the category names. When we started adding Azure and Vmware and the other ones, then we started adding the provider name onto the back of the category. So it looked weird to have VM and then VM Azure. So we did a data migration this sprint to migrate those over to VM Amazon and image Amazon, so it'll migrate existing tag categories, and that brings it in line with the rest of the provider tag categories. For Google, we fixed a refresh failure when there's a load balancer that got deleted during a refresh. So it's possible to have the load balancer get deleted, but a number of the health checks still around. So if you try to do the cross-reference, the API call was failing, and that was blowing up the refresh. So we're now handling that. Next slide, please. On the IBM Cloud side, they updated the cloud volume status to indicate whether it was attached to any instances, so that you can more easily see on the cloud volume summary screen which cloud volumes are able to be attached and which ones are already attached. IBM Terraform fixed an issue they noticed where a configured system hostname was sometimes missing for instances that are deployed on IBM Cloud, apparently depending on which IBM Cloud backend the instances are running on. The host name is in 1 of 2 places, and so they now look in both places for that host name. So make sure you get a host name for the configured system. For Overt, we noticed there's an issue with data centers being deleted and recreated every refresh. This was actually reported by a community user. And so what was happening was they were being deleted as part of the folders collection and then created as part of the data centers collection every single refresh. So we fixed that up so that they're now found and created as part of just the base class collection. For VMware, a couple of fixes here. We fixed a problem with customization specs not being handled properly if you didn't select an existing one in inventory, but you still want to apply some customization. The name was actually coming in as an empty string as opposed to nil. We also fixed an issue with provisioning. If you're trying to auto start the VM and the VM isn't in the operation worker cache yet, it was failing to start the VM. So now we just requeue it until it exists in the cache. And that's it for providers. Next slide.
Yeah, sure. So this past sprint, 18 PRs were merged across all the platform space repos. There were a handful of noteworthy ones, starting with enhancements. Brandon added ingress network policy objects to the operator, and this will prevent traffic from coming from unexpected locations. He also contributed enhancements in the Podify documentation by adding some information about migrating from multi-server, multi-zone appliances to Kubernetes. And he fixed the RBAC policy error by adding permissions to the network policy role. And a noteworthy change made in the build space by Satoe was to bump the version of CentOS ManageIQ is built on to 8.3, which could be a bit me when I was trying to update an appliance, so I thought it would be worth mentioning. So if folks have issues with that, look into Yum updates. That's it for the platform space. On to Alberto.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Yep, so for the API, we have a couple of enhancements that came in. Lucy added the rename action to VMs, showing here doing a rename on a single VM resource, and there's also the availability to do it in bulk. So essentially, it's the rename action and the new name of the VM, and that action does create an async request, so you can see the response that includes the task ID and href that can be queried later. So next slide, please. Okay, Libor enabled, he added the set ownership action for cloud templates and instances. So this is a similar signature that set ownership we have for the other resources. But essentially you post the action to the specific instance and set ownership. And here in this example, we're setting a group and an owner for that resource. And next slide, please. Okay, so David updated the base endpoint, which is our /API endpoint, to also return the time zones available from the Rails server. And as you see here, you have the settings and entity server info. We have also a new section for the time zones available that is used for showing those options, showing that option in the UI for users to select. And that's it for the API. Next slide, please.
And before we conclude, there's a special message from Jason.
Yep, so I just wanted to announce that this past sprint, we released Kasparov 1 Alpha 1. There's a blog post and a talk.manageiq.org article with the details on it. And if you can download it and play with it, that would be greatly appreciated. Let us know what problems you find.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. And with that, we conclude the Sprint 151 review. The next one will be in 2 weeks, December 23. And I'd like to thank everyone, all the contributors, all the people who spoke here, and everyone involved in the project, and wishing everyone a happy holiday season here. Thanks.